Okay, there we go. So for the share update for today, we have a few items. I've gotten some emails from individuals regarding the OCLC update holdings that they had advertised to all libraries saying it's a free one-time thing. Just so everyone knows, we here at Share and IHLS are actually managing this process for all member libraries, and we'll submit a single file with all holdings and information at one time. That should be happening mid-April. Individual libraries do not have to do anything at this time, so don't worry about filling out any forms, or if you already have, go ahead and let whoever contacted you know that you don't need to continue with the process, that your consortium is taking that on. Okay, the next thing is the Share birthday party, and this will be April 4th at 3 p.m., and you can register in L2. We do have a couple really cool presenters going to be at that, so I highly encourage everyone to register and attend. And then lastly, we've had another couple libraries asking about this. We will be purging deleted bib records every 3 months. The next purge will be the first week of April for records deleted between January 1st and March 31st of this year. And then the next one after that would be 3 months later. And then deleted item records are purged monthly, usually the second day of the month. Okay, and that is all I have for share.
Okay, good morning. This is Edie for the Bibliographic and Cataloging Standards Committee. Really nothing new. We still have 2 open seats on the committee. So if you're interested, please contact the chair of the committee, which is Donna Shaw, and I will put her email in the chat in a minute. Our next meeting is Friday, April 22nd at 10 a.m. by Zoom. The registration is open for that in L2. If you have anything for the agenda, please send that to Donna as well. And as always, everyone's welcome to attend. If you're one of the certified share catalogers, you get cataloging CE credit for attending that committee meeting. So that's all for the BIB Standards Committee. So starting in the miscellaneous section, I've got a little addition to that for something that came in yesterday after we had already posted the agenda. This was an email that came out yesterday on the Program for Cooperative Cataloging listserv. And they said in that email that the Library of Congress is supporting the change of the subject heading slaves to the heading enslaved persons. So at their editorial meeting this month, they'll be discussing their plan for making the changes to the authority records, and then they will be issuing a list of the headings that need to be changed. Because there are going to be so many, the main topics plus any related headings, there's going to be a list dedicated just to those changes. So as soon as that list is published, we'll start working on changes to our records as well. So the next thing on there is MARC changes, and this comes from OCLC's bibliographic update for February of 2022, where they validate recent changes to MARC coding. A few things in there that we need to be watching for or looking out for. First of all, in MARC tag 007 for sound recordings, the subfield N, which was previously called capture and storage technique, has been renamed, and now it's called original capture and storage technique. So of the codes for that subfield, pretty much the one that we use the most is code D, which used to be called digital storage, and now it's called electrical capture, digital storage. So they've just renamed the subfield. Then in MARC tag 034, which is called coded cartographic mathematical data, that field definition has now been broadened. It used to be that that tag was only used in records for maps and cartographic material, and it was paired with MARC tag 255, which was also a field for cartographic mathematical data, but in text form. So the 034 is coded mathematical data for cartographic material. It's used to record latitude and longitude. It's used to record scale. It's used to record projection. And previously, as I said, it was only used in records for cartographic material, but now the definition has been broadened so that it can also be used in records for non-cartographic material to record geographic coordinates, and quoting from bib formats here, geographic coordinates of the structure, site, or feature depicted or described in the resource, or the geographic location from which the image was captured. So can probably use that a lot with maybe if you're for metadata for digital images, but also in bib records. Say if you're cataloging a resource about like Yellowstone National Park, maybe, that you could include an 034 field with the geographic coordinates for the park. And in that case, you don't have to also put in the field 255. This is something optional to add. You might be seeing it in records. I don't know how much it's going to be adopted. If you see it in a record, you don't have to delete it, but you also don't need to add it if it's not there. The next change is in bibliographic field 340, which is the one for physical medium. We've got another new subfield, lowercase l, and this one is for binding. So previously, if we had something that was spiral bound or it was in a 3-ring binder, then we would put in a 500 note to say that. Well, now rather than the 500 note, we can use this 340 subfield L. There is an RDA registry list. It's called type of binding. The code for that is RDA-TB. So if you have something that is spiral bound, you just add in with all your other 3XX or 34X fields, the 340 subfield L with the term spiral binding, and subfield 2 RDA-TB. You can also use it in cases where we had things in 3-ring binders and we were putting in a 500 note to indicate that. You can also now do that in this 340 subfield L with the term open ring binding, if it's the kind of 3-ring binder where you pull the rings open to add sheets or take out sheets. So we'll be updating our book checklist to add that in there. But just in case you start seeing that, or if you get something that's spiral bound or in a binder, then you need to start using this 340 subfield L for that. And then the last change is bib field 344, which is sound characteristics. In records for sound recordings, they've got a new subfield J, and the name of that is original capture and storage technique. So it's basically the same wording as what you use for the new wording of the codes that we put in that subfield N of the 007. So if you've got a record for a sound recording, you code the 007 subfield N as that code D. Then you also want to add this 344 subfield J with the same term, electrical capture, digital storage. If you code the 007 subfield N as unknown, which is code U, then you don't need to worry about the 344 subfield J. So we will also be updating our sound recording checklists. Seems like we have to update these checklists every other month, just about. So those are new changes in MARC coding. Does anybody have any questions about those? Okay, I am going to turn it over to Don.
Thank you, Edie. Okay, I have an update on OCLC's virtual Ask office hours. Session for March is Bibliographic Formats and Standards, Chapter 3, a deep dive. Bibliographic Formats and Standards, Chapter 3 immerses the reader in a flood of information about provider-neutral cataloging, local information in records, related parts and publications, and special types of publications like integrating resources. As usual, the session will be presented twice to accommodate a wide swath of time zones. The first will be Tuesday, March 8th, today at 10 a.m. Eastern Time, 9 a.m. Central Time. And yes, I'm aware that is right now. The second time is on Thursday, March 17th at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, 3 p.m. Central Time. Now, following each presentation, there is time to ask questions about the virtual Ask QC office hour topic or about any other WorldCat quality matter that comes to mind. The sessions are also recorded and can be listened to at a time convenient for you. Now, the topic and registration information is available for these 2 March virtual Ask QC office hour presentations and for future office hours through June of 2022 on the Ask QC office hours pages. You can see a link in the agenda for that topic and registration, and we'll also be putting it in the chat here in just a moment. You may also tap into the recordings, slides, and questions and answers from these past presentations. When you register for a session, you will receive an email reminder before your chosen session, along with a link to the WebEx event. All virtual Ask QC office hours are available from OCLC at no charge to you. And lastly, remember that you can use your L2 learning log to record events that you've attended that are not listed on the L2 calendar, and that these may be eligible for continuing ed credits as a cataloger. And Jennifer, who is up next, will have some information about that.
You, Don. So everyone's favorite time of year, CE hour updates. My goal is to have everyone's updated CE hours out by Friday. However, I will need everyone's help with that. If you have any unreported CE, please go ahead and get that submitted via the form that I'm putting in the chat. So yes, do that. And then you do not have to submit the form if you are watching live today for this session, or if you watch it through the Moodle training portal, as we get notifications about that. However, if you put any non-reported CE into your L2 learning log, please do submit the form. I can't see your learning logs. And if you have any questions about CE hours, feel free to email me at any time, and I'm happy to pull them on that day. Okay, so the next thing is reminders. It seems like this is our normal monthly reminder. Please remember to only use the volume field when you're attaching to a bibliographic record for a monographic set for complete works in multiple volumes that are published in the same year. Please, if you have any barcoders, please make sure that they know that as well. We get a lot of emails about things in the volume field, such as AR numbers, series, genres, etc., that we have to move out. Okay. Also, do not circulate on order records if you don't mind letting your barcoders and/or circulation departments know. If your library is waiting on a record to be brought in, keep checking on it to see if a full level record is there, or submit it for cataloging if necessary. And then lastly, please do not circulate items before their street release date. I was recently contacted about 2 bestsellers that were brought in that quite a few libraries are circulating on either a few days before, about a week before. If you have a contract with a distributor or publisher, you do agree that you won't release those books to general circulation before their street release date. If we break those contracts, that could hurt all of us as a whole. So just pay attention to those. If you have any questions, please let me know. That is all of my reminders. I'm going to stop sharing this agenda and switch it over to our review for cataloging DVDs and Blu-rays. So give me just 1 second.
I think we're going to have let Pam do
sorry.
their CMC update
Thank
first.
Pam, CMC update.
Yep, sorry. Okay, I'm putting in the chat box our online with a CMC for this month. It's word of mouth transcribing an oral history collection. You do need to register in L2. This is a pre-recorded presentation by 2 of our past metadata catalogers, but the CMC staff will be present to answer questions. And this might also be a time for you to think about digital collections that you have in your library that you either want to work on yourself or if you want our help with. So please register. Thanks, Jen.
And then Jenna had a great question. Do you have a good source other than the packing slip that will show what the street date is? So for identifying when you can start catalog or releasing your books for circulation, Amazon is good. You can also check on the publisher's individual websites, and your distributor should have it there as well. Also reach out to us or another library. We can always check to see what our distributor or publisher is doing. Okay.
Okay, I think we're ready to start with the review. So over the last couple months, we have in the catalogers training session, we have been talking about DVDs and Blu-rays. So, okay, there we go. So we're going to do a little bit of a review, kind of a Q&A sort of thing. Okay, next slide. So our first question, per RDA, what is the preferred source of information for a DVD or a Blu-ray? And your choices are the container or accompanying material, title screens or credit frames, an outside source such as a website or a publisher, the disc label, an internal source such as the disc menu. So just put in the chat the letter of what you think the answer is. All right, so we've got a B and a D. Lots of people putting in D, a couple Bs. Okay, let's go on to the next slide with the answer. So the answer is the preferred source of information is the title screen or the credit frame. But when it's not practical, you don't have the equipment, you don't have the time to take the cataloging from that source, then your secondary sources are the disc label, container, the internal source, or an outside source like a website or a publisher. But what happens if there's absolutely no title information from any source at all? What do you do then? And just go ahead and pop something in the chat. So what do you do if there's no title information on the container, on the disk, on the an internal source, an outside source? So we've got people saying a website, the publisher. Okay, go ahead and yeah, there you go. So if there's absolutely no information from any source, you don't have a way of looking at the title screen of the credit frame, then the cataloger creates a title. Yes, and so Wendy put in there that you want to put it in and watch it. You do. That's your preferred source. That's what you always want to do first if you can. But if you can't, then you have these secondary sources, and if none of those give you anything, then you as the cataloger devise a title, and of course you would put a note in the record to indicate that. All right, next slide. Question number 2. Statement of responsibility includes, and there are several functions listed here. So you want to select all of the ones that apply to the statement of responsibility. So your choices are production company or companies, the cast, screenwriters, producers, costume designers, and directors. So of those, what belongs in the statement of responsibility? And by that we mean the subfield, the 245 subfield C. We've got A, C, D, and F. All right, we got somebody put in C. All right, next slide. Let's look at the answer. So several of you have put in A, C, D, and F, and that's correct. The 245 subfield C, which is your statement of responsibility, includes functions that are considered to have overall responsibility for the entire work. And that includes production companies, screenwriters, producers, and directors. But we had a couple of other functions listed in our choices there. So those are still functions that contribute to the work, although they're not part of the statement of responsibility. So what about the cast? Where do we put the cast in our bib record? We've got in the chat, it says 7XXs. We do list the names of the cast in added entry fields, but those names have to be justified somewhere in the body of the record before we can put them in the 7XX field. Okay, we got some people putting in 511. Okay, go ahead and hit the answer. So it's a 511 note, and then correct, you would put 7XXs. You don't have to put a 7XX in for everyone that's in a 511 note, but you can. What about the costume designer? What note field does that function go in? Okay, I'm not seeing anything in the chat, so you can put the name in a 7XX, but before you put anything in an added entry field, it needs to be justified in the body of the record. So where do we put the justification? There you go. We've got a 508 in there. All right, so go ahead and hit that one. It is the 508 node is where you put the costume designer, as well as editor, set designer, composer, cinematographer. A lot of different functions go in that 508 node. So these are people that contribute to the work, but they're not considered as having the overall responsibility. Okay, so next slide, and I'll hand it to Linda.
Hi, this is Linda, and my questions, the first one is, when should the genre heading 655, second indicator 7, subfield A, feature films with the second indicator LCGFT be added to a record? And your responses are: A, this field should be added to every DVD or Blu-ray record. B, when the running time is 40 minutes or more. C, only when the running time is 90 minutes or more. Or D, this field is not used in DVD or Blu-ray records. Okay, I'm getting a few responses. Okay, I'm getting mostly B's, and that, if you could click to the next slide, please. I'm getting mostly B's, and that is the correct answer. It's when the running time is 40 minutes or more. So if you have one that is less than 40 minutes, what genre heading would you use for that film? Just put it in the chat if you know. Okay, could you give us the answer? You would use 655, second indicator 7, short films. Okay, and question 4. What information can be included in the new subfields C and D of mark tag 345? Your choices are: A, subfield C, 2.34 to 1. B is D, widescreen as 2 words with the subfield 2 of RDA AR. Subfield C, which would be full screen RDA AR, or D, all of the above. Okay, I'm getting D's. if you can give us the answer. D is the correct answer. Subfield C is the aspect ratio value, and subfield D is the aspect ratio term. And once again, they do use those as two separate words with both widescreen and full screen. And you have the term RDA AR, which is RDA aspect ratio. So the next question follow-up for that is true or false. Subfields A and B may also be used in records for videos. Okay, I've got a couple of falses and a true. Anybody else want to take a guess? Another false. Could we see the answer? The answer is false. These subfields only apply to motion picture film. All right, I'm going to pass it off to the next person in our list.
Thank you, Linda. This is Don again. For question 5, which of the following is not an RDA core element for video recordings, according to the original RDA toolkit? A, physical description. B, statement of responsibility. C, subject headings. D, publication information. And E, identifiers such as ISBN, UPC, publisher's number, etc. So let's see what we've got coming up. If anybody's posted yet. Okay, we've got a C, we've got a D. Anybody else besides Carolyn and Wendy willing to put themselves out there? I know I was always nervous about posting the right or wrong answer. Okay, we got another D. Okay, well, let's go ahead. We got 3 Ds. Yes, thank you for moving on. Yes, C, the subject headings. Okay, is the answer there. And for the follow-up question, true or false, if there is no publisher on a resource, but there is a distributor, the distributor becomes a core element. True or false? And we've got several trues. Go ahead. Go ahead and to the answer. And yes, true. When there is both a publisher and a distributor, the distributor is optional. If there is a distributor but no publisher, then the distributor becomes core. Okay, next question. 6. Which field should be used to record the source of description note? A, 500, B, 511, C, 588, or D, 600. Which field should be used to record the source of description note? And we've got a couple of C's. There's C's so far, just C's. Anybody else? Now it looks like everybody likes C. Let's go ahead and go. And that is correct. The 588. It used to be recorded at 500, but they made that change so that 588. So when editing a record, what should you do if a source of description note is in a mark tag 500? Yeah, sorry, this one's not a true or false or ABC. What would you do if you came across a mark tag 500 that had that information? There we go. Several are telling us to change it to 588. Go ahead to our answer, please. Yes, exactly. Change it to the 588 and delete the 500. Okay. Thank you all very much, and passing it on to the next person.
Okay, thank you, Don. This is Liz. Question number 7. What field does the 046 special coded dates field pair with? And your choices are 500, history of work note with date of production or release, 518, date, time, and place of an event note, C, 264, or D, none of the above. Okay. Got a few B's in there. Can we see the answer? And the answer is A, 500, history of a work note with date of production or release. And what field does the 518 date, time, and place of an event note pair with? Okay. Got a few different answers. Can we go ahead and see the correct answer? Thank you. And the answer is the 033, the date, time, and place of an event, coded form. Okay, question number 8. What should you do if you see accessibility features, i.e. subtitles for the deaf and hard of hearing, or SDH, captions, described video, etc., in a 546 note? A, leave it as is. B, move it to a 500 note. C, move it from the 546 field and place in a 532 field. D, remove the field altogether. And I'm not seeing any responses. There we go. C's and B's. Okay, can we display the answer? C, move it from the 546 field and place in the 532 field. And what field does the 532 note pair with? Okay, I'm not seeing anything. I guess we could move on to the response. The 341 field, accessibility content. Okay, move on to the next person.
Hi, everyone. This is Sue. Question 9. In subfield A of the 300 field, what term should be used to describe the carrier type for a Blu-ray? Would that be A, Blu-ray disc, B, compact disc, C, video disc, or D, DVD video? And it looks like we're getting mostly C's, a couple A's. And the answer is C, video disc. And the follow-up for that is true or false. Time entered in subfield A of the 300 includes the total time of the feature film and any special features. Is that true or false? And we're getting a lot of falses. And that's correct, false. The time in subfield A of the 300 includes the time of the feature film only. So let's take a look at question 10. The use of the general material designation, or GMD, is a share local practice. And then we see an example of that in the 245. Subfield A is the title proper, and then subfield H is the GMD. So which statements below are true of the use of the GMD? A, the GMD is added to Polaris records only. B, subfield H comes after subfields A, N, and P, but before subfield B. C, the GMD is added to both WorldCat and Polaris records. D, both A and B, or E, both B and C. And we're getting a lot of D's. Let's see the answer. And that's correct, both A and B, that they are only added to records in Polaris and not to records in OCLC. And the GMD comes before subtitle or before subfield B in the 245, but after a lot of those other fields. Follow up, true or false? In Polaris records, a GMD should be added to variant title fields. And it looks like lots of falses coming in. And that's right, that's false. GMDs are only added to the 245. Any questions?
All right, thanks, Linda and Don and Liz and Sue, and all of you catalogers out there. You did great on the Q&A. Question is, can this be made into a handout? Everything that we've talked about in these questions is in the slides that we went over in January and February and on our checklist. So I don't know if we really need to make this into a handout because it's not a complete course about DVDs. All of that is in the last 2 months that we talked about Blu-rays and DVDs, and we have slides, and there was a set of slides for those. Okay, I am going to share my screen. Last month, we started on editing a bib record for a DVD, and we didn't finish. So let me open up that record. And I thought I saw something else in the chat. Let me see. I used the checklist. Could you update the checklist, or is November 2021? I think there's one from January of 2022 that was posted in L2. And I believe it's on the share website now, but I'd have to check that. But it was the one that's posted with that was posted in L2 as the handouts. But if you don't see it, let me know and I'll email it to you. Okay, so we got a little ways into editing this record that we started on last month. So there were some things that we need to do. You know, this record was an AACR record. We had to update it to an RDA record. So one thing we had to do was we had to add the subfield E with the RDA in our 040. So we started going through the updates just of the things that we would do for OCLC. So we'll finish with that, and then we'll come back and go through the things that we would do according to share local practice. So again, we added the subfield E with the RDA, and I'm only going to go through, usually the way I edit when I do it myself is I edit the variable fields first, and then I come up and do the leader and the fixed field. However you do it yourself when you do your own editing is perfectly fine. If you want to do the fixed fields first, then your variable fields, go back and forth between the variable fields and the fixed fields, that's perfectly okay. But for today, I'm going to go down through the variable fields and then come up and we'll do the fixed fields. So another thing that we did last month was when we started this record, this had a second indicator of a 2. We changed that to a 1. We also updated the subfield 2 of our 082 field under the new way of formatting that subfield 2, that we got our Dewey Decimal number from looking at WebDewey. which was the 23rd edition. It's published in English, and this is the date that we looked at that in WebDewey. So we updated that. All right, I think there's a couple more things that we did. We added this optional field of the 257, which is the field for countries of the headquarters of the production companies. So we added that. That's an optional field, but we went ahead and decided to add that. We worked down in our publication area. So we had a publisher. We opted to go ahead and add the distributor. You don't have to do that, as we talked about in the review. Is if you have a publisher, then you can add the distributor if you want, but it's optional. If we did not have a publisher, then our distributor would be a core element. But in this case, it's not. We just added that as an option. So when we originally had this record to edit, it said here distributed by Buena Vista Home Entertainment. Well, we don't have to put in the words distributed by. This subfield 2 lets us know that this field is for distribution information. And this is the name of our distributor. We did not have a 264 with a second indicator 4 and a subfield C for a copyright date because we didn't have a copyright date on our item. All we had on the back of our container was this 2005 release date. So we're using that as an implied publication date. We don't really know. We don't have a copyright date, but we're using the 2005 as an implied publication date for our publication and for our distribution because we don't have any other date to go by. But in this case, we do not have a 264 second indicator 4 for a copyright date. I think that was pretty much as far as we got. Oh, I know. We went through and fixed our 3.3x's and 3.4x's because we had some where, like in the 344, all of the terms were in the same field. So we went and split them out into separate fields. We added the new 344 subfield I for sound. We added our 345 subfield C and subfield D. So we went through our 3.4x fields. So I think we're ready to finish up. So one thing we have in this record is we have a 250 field that says widescreen. So in this case, we need to take this out because it's not correct to have widescreen here as an addition statement unless on our item it actually said widescreen addition or widescreen version. I think there's somebody that needs to mute their microphone. We've got some background. There we go. Thank you. Okay, so in this case, widescreen is not correct as an addition statement because it does not say on our resource widescreen addition or widescreen version. And we added widescreen down here in our 345 subfield D. So we've got the information. It's just we need to take out this addition statement here. So the way I delete a field is Alt delete on the keyboard. Okay, let's go on down. So all our 3.3x fields are correct, or 3.4x fields are correct. So the next thing we want to look at is we've got a series statement here. It's got a first indicator of 0 and it says Disney DVD. Whenever you see a 490 with the first indicator of 0, that first indicator is supposed to say this is not a traced series. But you should always check because a lot of times you'll see in a record where people have put in a series statement with a 490 0 But when you check in the authority file, there actually is an authority record for a series. So that's what we're going to do. I'm going to bring up the a search tool for the authority file, and I do it by function key Shift F2. No. What I did. All right, well, let me do it this way. I can go up here to a couple different ways I can do this. I can go to authorities and search LC names and subjects, or if I have my cursor in this field, there is a macro that I can run. And I have an icon on my toolbar that opens right up to the list of macros. And the one that I want is called Browse Authority Index. So I have my cursor in the field. I open up this macro to Browse Authority Index. I highlight that and I click Run. And it's a browse search, so it drops me down into a list. And I have a couple here that say Disney DVD. So I'm going to choose this one. So here's my authority record. I've got Disney DVD in a 130 field. And down here in my 645 with the subfield T, that tells me that this is a traced series. That code T tells me I have a trace series. And the authorized form of the series title is Disney DVD. So this is a series that is established as a title series. So it's a 130 in my authority record. I go back to my bib record. It goes in an 830. So in the authority record, it's a 130. In the bib record, it's in an 830. So I'm just going to add it right here. I'm going to put in a blank line. First indicator is blank, second indicator is 0, and my series title is Disney DVD. Yep. The 8XX fields have ending punctuation. The 490 field does not, but I need to change now my first indicator to a 1 because that indicates that this is a traced series. So I'm going to leave that there for the moment. All right, so then we have a 538 note. And all of this information that we used to put all together in this 538 note, all of this now we're recording in these 34X fields. So we don't need it all in the 538. So really the latest best practices with the 538 note, if we have a DVD, we just put in the term DVD. If this was a Blu-ray, then we would say Blu-ray with a semicolon, Blu-ray player required. But since it's a DVD, all we have to do is put in DVD. Then we have a 546 note, and it has our language tracks, English or dubbed French dialogue, optional French or Spanish subtitles, and closed caption. So we just talked about this in the review. What do we need to do here? So just pop in the chat. We've got closed caption in our 546. What do we need to do with that? We do need to record that information in a 341, but before that, there we go. We need to add a 532 for closed captioning and remove that, take that part of that information out of the 546. So the 546 is only for your language tracks and your subtitles. 532 is your accessibility information, subtitled for the deaf and hard of hearing, or it's SDH. closed captions. If it's described, you've got one of those described video tracks. If you've got sign language, that also goes in the 532. So I actually have, I'm going to put in a blank line here, and I actually have a text string for this. Excuse me. And my text string puts in both. So I just put them both in and take out what I don't need. In this case, we're going to go with what's on our container with this closed caption rather than SDH. So I'm just going to change that. The 532 does not have any ending punctuation, where the 546 does end in a period. So I'm going to take out my accessibility information out of the 546. So all we've got is my language tracks and subtitles. The 532 does pair with the 341 accessibility information, which we had already put in. We did that last month when we were looking at our 341s. Okay, so I see there was a question, an earlier question in the chat. One is a comment: the editing checklist for video recordings, the January 2022 checklist is on the SHARE website. And Jennifer put in a link, so thank you. So then the question is, I just want to be clear, if on the container it says just widescreen or full screen without the word edition or version, we don't add it as a 250, and that is correct. If it doesn't say anything about edition or version, you put it in the 345, but you don't add it as a 250. Okay. So we've got our languages and our accessibility information split out where they need to be. All right, so the next couple notes, this is our 511 note where we put our cast members. So if any of these are listed down below in added entry fields in a 7XX, they need to have been, it's called being justified in the body of the record. They need to be somewhere in a note or somewhere in the record in order for us to put them in as an added entry in a 7XX field. So we've got cast members in our 511. We've got other contributing functions in our 508. We have a note. This is a history of work note that tells us that this movie was originally released as a motion picture in 2004. So again, from our review earlier, what tag pairs with this 500 history of work note with our original release date or production date? So just pop that in the chat. What field pairs with this history of work note? Okay, so we've got an 046 in the chat, and that is correct. There's a question: if we add a 7XX for a local actor in a production, do we also add that to the 511? Yes, because you need to justify that added entry somewhere in the body of the record. So yeah, if you want to put in, and it's great to put in an added entry for somebody who's local that you want people to be able to find. So yes, you would want to add that name to the 511 before you put it in as an added entry in a 7XX. So good question. All right, so we have our history of work note, which is our original release date. So now we need to add our 046. I'm just going to do it right here. Add a blank line. We don't have any indicators. It's a subfield K. We put in our date. It's 2004. And then we need a subfield 2 with the code EDTF. And that's just the code for the standard for how dates are entered. So LC has chosen to use this EDTF standard as the way to enter dates. So that code is just saying it's coming from that standard. So we have some fields here that are kind of out of order. We have our 500 and our 046. We have our 490 and our 830. We don't really have to do anything when we save this record. It's going to move everything around where it needs to be. But with, you know, if you're editing a record and you want to see everything in the right place, you can go up here on your menu bar and do edit and reformat. You can do, if you like function keys, you can do Control R, or there's this icon. If you have this icon on your toolbar, you can use that. So I'm going to do that. So that's the icon to reformat. So we click that. And now we've got our 490 and our 830 is moved down to the bottom of the record where it belongs. We have our 046 is up here, along with the other standard number and number fields and code fields, and then our 500 note with our history of work. All right. The next field we have here is a 500 note that says this is a widescreen version. It gives us our aspect ratio value. Since now we have that in the 345 subfield C and subfield D, we really don't need this anymore here. So I'm going to take that out. We've got a couple of notes. We've got a 521 note that gives us our rating and some information about the rating. We've got our 520, which is just a summary of what the film is about. What you want to do here, you want to just maybe run spell check, make sure that your spelling is correct. And also you want to watch for any weird characters of punctuation that come in. Like when you copy a summary from a website into a bib record, a lot of times the punctuation doesn't translate as punctuation, it translates as weird characters. So you want to be watching for that and make sure you correct that if you see that. All right, we've got a 500 note with our special features. So we would just look and make sure that these were the same special features. And we did that during the matching process. So this note looks pretty good. This also includes the time of each one of those special features after the title of it. And that is optional. You don't have to do that, but it's okay if you do. It's fine if it's there, but you don't have to add it. Then we come down to a contents note, 505. And this one has some information in it that really shouldn't be here. It's okay to have our special features listed, each title of the special features listed, that's okay. But this information about widescreen, that doesn't belong in a contents note. It really does, the word special features doesn't need to be there. It can be, actually it's okay, I guess. But our widescreen doesn't belong here. And then, so all the rest of these are all our special features. But then we get down here, language information also does not belong in the 505. So we would end our 505 here and take out our language information, our sound information, none of that goes in the 505. Okay. So then we go down to our subject headings. And we have some that look pretty good. It is about the Declaration of Independence. It is about cultural property. We've got this adventure and adventurers But we've already got a genre term for action and adventure films. So we really don't need that as a 650. So I would take that out. I also would take out this adventure and adventurers coded with the second indicator of a 1 with which is a children's subject heading code. This is really not a children's film. I mean, it's kind of geared for families. I think the rating is PG, but it's not a children's film. So I would take this out. So these subject headings that are in here, the French headings, we've got some Spanish headings, we've got fast headings. For OCLC, all of these are fine. They can stay in. When we get down to any of these subject headings that have a second indicator of a 4, those you want to take out. OCLC puts those in automatically when an organization puts in a record that has kind of local subject headings in it. OCLC kind of, they don't really know what to do with it, I guess, in their automated program. So they put it in the 6XX field with the second indicator of a 4. So that really these are not correct. So if you see anything, any subject field with a second indicator of a 4, OCLC says you can take those out. So we would remove those. All right, and then so the rest of these for OCLC purposes are fine. So let's go down to our, these are our added entries for, in this case, these are personal name added entries for various people that have contributed or have responsibility for this work. So we've got our director and producer, we've got another producer, we've got screenwriters, we've got some actors. But what you want to do is you want to go through and you want to control your headings, your name headings to an authority record if there is an authority record for that name. And you won't always find an authority record for every name, but if there is, you want to control that. So we've got a 700 for Nicolas Cage. It's put in the correct format, Cage, Nicholas. But we want to make sure that this name is right. But first of all, what do we need to do here? What are we missing in this added entry? So we've changed this from an AACR record to an RDA record. All right, we've got a couple of comments from Esther and Julia and Wendy. We need to add our relationship designator, and that's correct. So we need to add our subfield E with our relationship designator, which is actor, the period. Now I need to control this heading to see if we can link it to an authority record. So to control a single heading, I have my cursor in the field, and like I generally like to use function keys. So I hit function key F11. You can also do, I never remember where this is. We can go to on the edit on the menu bar, control headings, and then single heading. You can do that. If you have this icon on your toolbar, you can do that. Generally, I just like to use the function key. I find that just as easy. So I'm going to hit the F11. So it's saying that it did not find an authority record for this name. So sometimes people will see that and they will think that means there's not an authority record for this name, but that's not necessarily true. It could just be that there is an authority record, but it's for a different form of the name. So I'm going to cancel that. I'm going to do the Shift F11 or Shift F2, sorry, to bring up the search box for the authority file. And I'm going to search to see if there is an authority record for Nicolas Cage. I could do it up here as a browse search in the command line. If I did that, I have to put in the word scan or just SCA. Then I have to put in my index label, which is PN colon. And then the name that I want to search. I'll get rid of the rest of this. So I could do it here as a command line search, which is a browse search, or I could do it down here in a personal name search, which is a keyword search. Either one is fine. It's whatever you get used to. So let's see what we get. So I'm going to say, okay. So that does drop us down into a list where I did find an authority record for a personal name of Nicolas Cage. It highlighted that record. Now we have to look at the authority record and make sure that this is our same person. So this is for somebody who is an actor, is affiliated with motion pictures, production, direction, acting, some films that he's been in. So we think this is the right person. But the established form of the name is Cage, Nicholas with the subfield D and his birth date. So this is what we want to put in our 700 field. So I can just go ahead and copy this. So just because OCLC doesn't come up with an authority record when you search a name or when you go to control a name doesn't mean there's not an authority record for that name. You still want to make sure you search the authority file. All right, so I'm just going to paste that in. Now if I go to control this heading, it automatically controls it. All right, I see another one down here that is not affiliated or not linked to an authority record. So let's try that one. So again, I could do the icon, I could do the edit control single heading. I'm just going to hit the F11. So in this case, it does bring up an authority record, but sometimes when people do this single control the single heading and it comes up with an authority record, they see this note in red that says requested control is for an unqualified personal name. And they think that means that you cannot control this heading because it's an unqualified name. And that's not true. RDA would like every name heading to be controlled, to be qualified in some way, but that's not always the case. Sometimes the authority record is established with just the person's last name, comma, first name. So if you see that note, it doesn't mean that you can't control the heading. It just means, it's just kind of a little beware kind of thing. It's just saying, you know, this name isn't qualified, so be careful, you're not sure. And it does, but the other thing that people think sometimes is that if it comes up with a name, then that means that's correct. And they just, without looking at the authority record itself, they just click this insert heading button and put that name into their record. You always want to check the authority record that comes up and make sure it's for the right person. So we want to click on this and bring up our authority record. And here's the form of the name. It's just the last name, comma, first name. And it does say that this person is an actor, gives some of the films that he was in. So we would say, looking at this, that this is the right person. So we would click our insert heading and add that in there, but you would never want to, when you hit that F11 and it comes up with a name, you never want to just blanket say, okay, this is the right guy. It came up to an authority record, so I'm fine. You always want to check that authority record and make sure that it's the same, it's the right person, because there could be an authority record for somebody different. All right. One other of these headings I wanted to look at. All the rest of these, they're all controlled, they're fine. So we have this heading for our composer. And if we check the authority record, I think this is the right person. He is a musician, a record producer, but our relationship designator is not correct. The correct term is composer and then in parentheses expression. So we need to uncontrol this heading so that we can edit, and then we'll put in the correct relationship designator, and then we will control it again. So to uncontrol, if we do a control F11 on our keyboard, that unlinks this name from the authority record. And now we can edit the field. Let's say composer, and then all right, and now if I hit my F11, again, it's not going to automatically control a heading that is an unqualified name. So that's where I would have to check the authority record, which we did, so we know that's correct, and I click my insert heading. OCLC will automatically control a heading that does have some sort of a qualification with it, like a birth date, like here. OCLC will automatically control a heading that has a qualifier, but if it doesn't, it's going to pop up that box so that you can look at the authority record and make sure that's the right person. Okay. So looking at the rest of this, we have our production companies. So when we have our relationship designator that says presenter, that comes from the wording in the 245 subfield C, where it says Walt Disney Pictures presents. Then that entity is considered a presenter. And that's the relationship designator that you use in your added entry. So we've got added entries for our production companies, our publisher, our distributor. Then we have a couple of added entries because we had a French language track for this film. Then we add a 730 added entry for that, for our film, but with qualified by a subfield L for the French language track. So what about in our 546 says we have French and Spanish subtitles. Do we need to add an added entry for our film in Spanish because of the subtitles? So just yes or no in the chat. So the question is in connection. So actually the answer is no. We don't need to add an added entry for our film when the language is subtitles, but we do for languages of the language tracks, the actual audio tracks. So for the French, because the only other language track we have is French, we put an added entry for that, but not for subtitles. Okay, then we have another added entry for a sequel. And this is not something that you would have to add if you know what the sequel is, you can. This person chose to do that. You would just want to make sure that your relationship designator here in your subfield I is correct. And I did check this in the appendix in the toolkit, and sequel is a correct relationship designator. We have a series down here where we need to see if we need to control our series, linking it to the authority record. If I hit my F11, and it did automatically control that. So almost everything that we need to do in our variable fields, but just a couple more things. First of all, we have our 041, which is the language codes for our language tracks or subtitles. But we need to make a change here. We've got a subfield J with English as subtitles. And our film really doesn't have English subtitles. It only has French or Spanish subtitles. In English, what we have is captions. So there's a new subfield in the 041 for language codes for captions, and that is a subfield P. So I'm just going to take this out. And then here, after my subtitles, so we've got two subfield A's for our language tracks. We have a language tracks in English and language track in Spanish. We have subtitles in French and Spanish. So the subtitles go in subfield J. We have captions in English, that goes in subfield P. The original language of our film is English, so that goes in subfield H. So that's all of those. Another thing that we need to do is, because in our subject headings, it does talk about the United States, we need to add our 043, which is our geographic code for our location. And we can do that with a macro. You could look up, you know, the code for United States, but we can actually do that much easier with a macro. And I have this icon on my toolbar that opens up the macros. So under the OCLC macros, I want the one that says generate 043. So what it does is it looks in the subject fields, and if it finds a geographic location, then it automatically adds in the geographic code for that location. So I highlight that and I click run. And now I have my 043 with the code for the United States. Something else that we need to add is we don't have here an 007. This is a non-print format. We need our 007 field. Let's see if I can move this out of the way. There is a macro for adding the 007. So I could go to my icon here, but I'm going to go Tools, Macros, and Manage. And that opens up my macros. I open up my OCLC macros. The very first one is Add and Edit 007. So I click that and I click Run, and I hope it doesn't freeze because I've had that trouble before. And I'm afraid that's what it's going to do. Well, I was hoping it would be okay. So I don't know if anybody else has this problem, that sometimes when you go to do a macro, especially the 007, that it will come up, but it will just kind of freeze and you can't do anything. So I hope everybody kind of knows using the 007 macro is that the first thing that comes up is for you to choose the code for what format of material you're cataloging. So in this case, the code would be a V for video recording. You would click that, you would hit OK, and then it would open up all of the subfields that you need to code in that 007. So you would just put in your codes and click OK, and that would add the 007. I'm not going to try and do that because I don't want to freeze everything. Okay, so we would add the 007, and we could do it manually, but I'm not going to go through that. And in the in bib formats, there is an example 007, I think, for each format, so you could see what subfields and what codes, but it's much easier to use the macro when it works. But let's now, I think that's everything for what we need to do for OCLC, except we haven't done anything with our fixed fields. So we need to go back and see those. All right. So our type is a G, that's correct. It's visual material. our encoding level, it's an uppercase I, which is one of those codes that OCLC is no longer using. And they're asking that people, after they've edited and brought the record up to full cataloging, that they delete that. So we would take that out. Our source code, we don't have to edit. Our audience code is a G, which is fine because it is a G-rated film. Nothing in the control field. Our language code is ENG because the language of our resource is English. Bib level, it's just a monograph versus a serial, so it's M. Nothing that we need to code in form. It's not a government publication. This is our time, which is the time of our feature film only. That matches what we have in our 300, I think. Yeah. So this is the time just of our feature film, nothing about our special features. The MREC field, we don't need to edit. Our country code corresponds to the place of publication in our 264, which is California. So this is our code for California. So this is coded with an A as an AACR record. So what do we need to do here? All right, you need to change that to a lowercase I. All right, our type of material is V for video. Our technique is code L for live action. So in our date status code, we have code P. So let's look at what that means. Code P. Now let's see if we get down to our multiple dates. So code P is the date of distribution or release and date of production. So we see this sometimes in video recording records, and you can use it, but you only use it if your video is just the feature film with no special features. So the film now being released on DVD or Blu-ray, it's just the film, no special features, nothing added. In that case, you can use a code P with the date of release of your DVD, and then your date 1 is the date of the original film. But in our case, we have all kinds of special features on this film, so it's not correct to use the code P. So we have all these special features. So that means we've got content that's added to this DVD. So it's not exactly the feature film just translated to video. So it's not correct to use the code P. And the only date that we have for our DVD is that release date of 2005. So we're going to change this to an S for a single date. We have our 2005, and then we're going to delete out our date 2. So I think that is everything that we need to do for OCLC. But now we have to do our edits for our share local practice. So first, are there any questions about what we've done as far as OCLC edits? Anything from last month or this month? Let's see. So I guess other people have that same problem with the macro freezing. Okay, was there some question about deleting a field? Alt delete is what you use to delete an entire field. You can also, copy and delete, but just to take the whole field out, it's just the alt delete. There is some comments about the macro freezing. So Julia says, but she usually finishes the record and exits and comes back, and that helps sometimes. I'll have to try that, because I never know when it's going to happen, and it's very aggravating if you've done a lot of edits and then you can't save them. Okay, so any questions? Any other questions? Okay, so now we need to look at what we need to do for share, for our local edits, for bringing this record into Polaris. So what do we need to do here in our 245? All right, so we've got Julia puts in, we need to add a subfield H. And what does our subfield H need to say? Okay, our subfield H needs to say video recording, but is it one word or two? There we go. It's one word and it's in brackets. So, and then we know comes after subfield A. We don't have any subtitles or anything, so it would come before a subtitle, but we don't have that. So each, and then in square brackets, video recording, all one word. All right. What else do we need to do? What do we need to do in the way of an addition statement? Let's see. Okay, correct. We need to add an addition statement with DVD in square brackets. So we need to add our blank line. No indicators, square brackets, cap, DVD, all in caps. And then addition statements end with a period. All right, let's see what else we need to do. I think the other edits that we need to do have to do with our subject headings. So we have several subject headings in French. Should we leave those in or take them out? All right, so we've got several people saying to delete them. I'm just talking about the French headings now. We're not talking about fast headings yet. These French headings, our share local practice says that we leave in headings in non-English languages if the resource also has that language. So actually, let me bring up the share website. So when we're talking about use and retention of subject headings. So we keep non-English language subject headings if they are the same as the language of the item being cataloged. For video recordings, this includes the main language tracks and any dubbed language tracks. So since we have a language track in French, we can leave in these French headings. So these we're going to keep. But we have a couple of Spanish subject headings. What do we do with those? We don't have a language track in Spanish. We've got subtitles in Spanish. So correct. These we would take out because our local practice says we keep in non-English language headings for a language of the resource, but for videos that does not include subtitles. It only includes the language tracks and the dubbed tracks. So those are going to come out. And then I think we've already had somebody said we need to take out our fast headings, which is correct. That's when we talk about fast headings, we're talking about these headings that have a subfield 2, FAST. That's a code that stands for the controlled vocabulary that these come out of. Our local practice is not to use these headings because they cause duplicate displays in the pack. We don't have a way to mask that, so we take out the fast headings. We also don't need this 655.0 for DVD video discs because we've already got the 007, we've got our 250, we've got the 347, I think it is, that says DVD video, so we don't need that. Again, we have a Spanish one and some more fast headings. Lots of fast headings. All right, what about this GSAFD heading? What do we do with that? Take it out or leave it in? Okay, so our local practice is that we use genre headings out of the LCGFT if there is one available. And there is an LCGFT heading for feature films. So we don't need the GSAFD heading for Polaris. You would leave it in OCLC, but for Polaris, we don't need that. So we take that out. All right, so we have our genre heading for feature films, which we now know is for films that are 40 minutes or longer. This is another standard heading that you put in, fiction film or nonfiction film. If you're doing television series, you do fiction television series or nonfiction television series. That's a standard heading that you would put in. Caper films, if you looked at the scope note for this, you would see that it would apply to this type of film. We have a, because our film has captions or our video has captions, we have the LCGFT heading, video recordings for the hearing impaired. Do we also need this LCGFT films for the hearing impaired? Yeah, that one we would take out because really that's not, that's talking about actual motion picture film, and what we have is a video. So we don't need that. And if you're in a record and it just has this heading, films for the hearing impaired, and what you have is a DVD or a Blu-ray, you want to change that to video recordings for the hearing impaired instead. And in this case, video recordings is 2 words. In the GMD and the 245, it's 1 word. In the 655, it's 2 words. So this one we don't need. We've got action and adventure films that probably fits for this. What about this heading, the SMIG Fig heading? What do we do with that? All right, correct. We do take those out. That's according to our share local practice. You would leave it in for OCLC because other organizations may use these headings, but for Polaris, we don't. So we would take those out. All right. I think that might be everything. So we did our edits for OCLC. Then we came back and we did our edits that we would do for Polaris according to our local practices. So this record would then be ready to import into Polaris. Any questions there? All right, I think the next thing on the agenda, and I'm going to close that. The next thing on the agenda is MARC report. We talked in last month's catalogers training session that there's a new version of MARC report. It's 258 and it is free to download. It does not require a license, doesn't require a subscription. You can have it on any computer, as many computers as you like, on any computer. So just curious, cataloging libraries that have not used MARC report previously, have any of you downloaded it since last month? Stop sharing for a minute. So most of you that are on the call today, you're already using MARC report? Yeah, I love it too. It's pretty easy to update. If you're still on MARC 2.57, it's very easy to upgrade it to 258. So you just open up MARC report and then go up to help and then MARC report update, and it takes you to the link to download it. I don't know, has anybody had the problem? A couple of us have had an issue where after we upgraded to MARC to the 258, it was working fine for a while, and then at some random time you would go to open it and it would say it had to be reinstalled. And if that happens to you, just reinstall it and it seems to be fine. But a couple of us had that. Well, if you haven't had that problem, that's great. So, but like I say, if it happens to you, then just reinstall it, and it seems to be fine since then. Well, I was going to do a little demonstration of MARC report, but it really was kind of geared to people who had not been using it previously. Oh, Julia says they haven't updated yet. That's fine. 2.57 still works, but it's just as easy to update to 258. And I think they had said we will be getting possibly 1 or 2 more updates. It just depends, you know, MARC of quality is kind of, the Fritzes are kind of semi-retired. So, but they did say they were still going to do some things to MARC report. So Anyway, like I said, I was thinking of doing a demonstration, but it really was more geared toward libraries that had not previously been using Mark Report. So I don't know that we need to do that today. There is a handout in L2 for Mark Report. But if anybody has any questions on Mark Report about things that you don't know how to do, or I'd be happy to show it, but otherwise I don't think we need the demonstration. Maybe we'll check again next month and see if there are people that were not using it before but have since downloaded it. So I really do recommend it for everybody. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions. So I think the next thing on the agenda is called Cool Things We've Cataloged, and we actually didn't have anything really exotic this month. So what about you guys? Have anybody in the last month, have you gotten something into catalog that was unusual or you've never done before or really interesting? So just you can unmute and talk about it, or you can put something in the chat. I guess we're just, oh, telescope, metal detector, binoculars, a stud finder. Those all sound cool. Anybody else have anything? Book about fabric that was full of swatches. That sounds cool too. Anybody else? Oh, so Elizabeth said not necessarily something cool, but she did a book record from scratch. We had one of the local history Images of America book for Glenn Carbon. That's neat. So I hope you enjoyed. So I guess this was you don't do original records all that often. Yes. So there wasn't an OCLC and there were patrons calling about it. Well, good. Yeah, you don't always have to do original records, but it can be unusual. So Jill, is it the fabric book you want or the Glenn Carbon book? Jill says she wants to request the book and she wants to know the title, the fabric book. So Jane, if you want to put that title in there, then Jill can request it. Does anybody have any just general cataloging questions or any issues they want to bring up? So I'll turn it back over to Jennifer to see if anything we need for the wrap up.
I have nothing. Oh, I promise I will get the recording for this put up much sooner than I did February. My goal is by the end of the week, like absolute deadline. So I apologize for anybody who wanted February, and it's now up as of last week. If anybody has any questions, last call. Okay, hearing none, seeing none. Then I will go ahead and say, everyone have a great day. Thank you for attending, and we will see you next month on April 12th at 9 a.m. for the next catalogers training session.